An employee at the global engineering firm Arup joined what looked in every respect like an entirely ordinary video call. The company's chief financial officer, along with several other familiar colleagues, walking through a routine of unusually urgent financial request. Every person on that call other than the employee was generated by artificial intelligence. Over the course of the call, the employee authorized 15 separate wire transfers, total loss approximately $25 million. What makes this threat genuinely different from earlier generations of fraud is how little raw material it requires. Documented technical testing has shown that as little as 3 seconds of a person's voice pulled from a public earnings call, a conference recording, a social media video, anything publicly available is sufficient to generate a cloned voice with roughly 85% accuracy. For any executive, public figure, or professional who has ever spoken or recorded call, that raw material already exists somewhere online, whether they have considered that fact or not. This space is unfortunately full of inflated, poorly sourced statistics, so it's worth being precise about which figures come from audited primary sources. The FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center logged approximately $893 million in AI-enabled fraud losses in 2025. The first year, the agency tracked AI fraud as its own standalone category. Separately, Interest's 2026 identity fraud report, drawing on more than 1 billion identity verifications across 195 countries, found that deepfakes now account for 1 in 5 biometric fraud attempts globally, and a greater survey of security leaders found that 62% of organizations experienced at least one deepfake-enabled attack in the prior 12 months. This creates a genuinely uncomfortable problem for an entire category of security technology. Voice and facial biometric authentication was built on the premise that your voice and face are things only you can produce. Generative AI has quietly broken that premise. Independent testing found that human reviewers can identify a deepfake at barely better than a coin flip rate. Roughly 55% accuracy across a meta-analysis of 56 separate studies. Automated detection tools fare better in controlled conditions, achieving accuracy in the mid-90s. But that accuracy has been documented to drop by 40 to 50% once realistic background noise or audio compression exactly the conditions of an ordinary phone call are introduced. Security researchers tracking documented incidents has converged on 3 primary attack methods. Voice cloning used to impersonate an executive in a live phone call or a pre-recorded voicemail directing an employee to authorize an urgent transfer. Deepfake video used in exactly the manner the Arup case demonstrates, embedding fabricated participants into what appears to be a routine video meeting, an identity verification bypass used against automated Know Your Customer onboarding systems at banks and financial platforms, where a cloned face or voice is presented specifically to defeat a liveness check. Each exploits genuinely different trust mechanism, which is precisely why no single security control adequately covers all 3. It is worth walking through the Arab incident in more detail, because the mechanics reveal exactly why this attack succeeded against a sophisticated security-conscious global engineering firm. The attacker didn't rely on a single deceptive call. They staged an entire fabricated meeting populated with multiple synthetic participants simultaneously, each one a deepfake of a real, recognizable colleague. This mattered enormously from a psychological standpoint. A single suspicious call invites scrutiny, but a full meeting populated with several familiar, correctly voiced colleagues, all behaving consistently with how those people normally would, overwhelms the instinct to verify. The employee wasn't careless. They were presented with a scenario specifically engineered to look from every available signal, exactly like an ordinary internal financial approval process. That is the actual listen. This class of attack isn't defeated by being more alert. It is defeated by having a verification process that doesn't rely on recognition at all. The regulatory and legal landscape remains to be direct about it. Badly behind the technology as of 2026, there is no federal law in the United States that specifically criminalizes deepfake, enabled financial fraud as its own offense. Prosecutors instead rely on existing wire fraud and impersonation statutes, which were not designed with this specific threat in mind. Tennessee's Elvis Act, effective from mid-2024, became the first U.S. state law explicitly protecting an individual's AI cloned voice and likeness, but its protection is narrow and limited to Tennessee's residents. The European Union's approach has moved further under Article 50 of the EU AI Act, binding from August 2026. AI-generated content will require mandatory labeling, with penalties reaching up to 35 million euros or 7% of global company turnover for non-compliance, a substantial deterrent through one that addresses labeling rather than the fraud itself directly. In the interest of the same rigor, I would apply to and any research claim it is worth flagging directly. This space is statured with statistics that sound authoritative but don't survive scrutiny. Widely circulated figures claiming $1.8 billion lost to voice cloning scams, or $2.3 billion stolen from elderly victims, frequently attributed to the FBI, don't match the FBI's own published totals. The agency's entire AI fraud category combined across every attack type totals $893 million, with the elderly specific figure closer to 352 million. Much of the AI catching data calculating in this space originates from vendors who sell detection or verification products. A real conflict of interest worth factoring in whenever you encounter a dramatic statistic without clearly named independently auditable primary resource. The practical guidance emerging from organizations that have adapted successfully converges on a single principle. Stop trying to detect a deepfake in real time and instead build verification processes that don't depend on recognizing one at all. Concretely, that means establishing out of band verification for any financial request above a defined threshold, confirming a request through a separate, independently initiated communication channel, never one embedded within the same call or message making the request. It means eliminating single approver authority from large transfer regardless of how convincingly urgent or how senior the requester appears to be. And it means normalizing a simple, unglamorous cultural habit, treating a request to bypass normal verification procedures, however urgent it seems, as itself the primary red flag. Because urgency is precisely the emotional lever this entire category of fraud is engineered to pull. For most of human history, hearing a familiar voice or seeing a familiar face on a call was itself a form of verification reliable enough that we built entire professional and financial systems around, trusting it implicitly. That assumption no longer holds, and pretending otherwise is the actual vulnerability. The organizations navigating this well aren't the ones with the best deepfake detectors. They are the ones that rebuilt their processes to never need one in the first place. Thank you so much for your presence, and I'm really looking forward your interactions, your questions, and your comments. Make sure I read each and every one of them. Looking forward to see you in the next lecture.